How's it going, guys? Necromancer Noob, and today we got a fun video for y'all. We are going to be doing kind of a rant slash discussion about IGN's gameplay overview of Space Marines 2. Now, as to none of our surprise, right, IGN has some terrible takes on this video, and that's why I want to go over it, because one, some of them are hilarious. Two, I think some of them are just downright silly. Like, I just don't understand why he's complaining, but we're going to get into it. Now, a little backstory. I have not played any Space Marine game, or do I know anything about this world to begin with, or the lore, but this gameplay alone got me pretty hooked on it. I was pretty excited seeing gameplay for it. I mean, probably the most similar I've played to this is Vermintide 2 or like a Helldivers 2, but this seems like the best of both worlds kind of mashed together. And as some of you know, Helldivers 2 has kind of some heat right now. They're not doing the best things when it comes to balancing the game and just patch notes in general. But this seems to be the scratch for that itch that needs to be scratched, if that's the best way to put it. Anyways, more of the story. I'm excited for this. So we're going to talk about this gameplay, and we're going to go over this guy's hot takes. And, yeah, let's get into it.
Spread so far and wide from its humble tabletop origins that I would almost consider the fantasy of being one of the Adeptus Astartes, a Space Marine, as being on par with being Batman or a Jedi Knight at this point.
Like I said, I know nothing about Space Marine lore, but there is one thing I do know, and that's that Space Marines are badasses. That's about what I've taken from, slight lore videos and gameplay. But we move on.
Eviscerate this abomination!
And Space Marine 2 brings me closer to that fantasy than maybe any previous game has. At its best, it's practically 40k Nirvana, mowing down disorienting numbers of Tyranids with a heavy bolter or cutting a path through them with a chainsword.
Seconds away, brother!
At times, the controls can get a little clunky, especially on a controller, but I suppose some of that comes with being an 8-foot-tall juggernaut coated in ceramite.
Now that part right there really caught my eye, because it seems like they're almost complaining that you have weight to your movements and actions, which that's usually a complaint people have for games, is when they don't have a reaction, you don't have a heaviness or like a feel to it, right? Like you're swinging something and your dude's swinging it like it's a toothpick. Like, you need to have some sense of realism, in that sense of you feel like you're actually doing something. You feel like you're actually throwing a punch out, right?
Enemy armor seem like a joke. I wasn't totally sold on the melee stuff, unfortunately. Carving through gaunts with a chainsword is just as exhilarating as it should be, but Space Marine 2 has also tried to implement a Sekiro-esque system of telegraphed dodges and parries to counter enemy special attacks, and I'm not quite sure if it works here.
So first things first, we gotta stop comparing every single game where you use melee weapons as a Sekiro, Elden Ring, Dark Souls clone. There are hundreds of other games that are melee focused that do the same mechanics. It does not make them a clone of that game. Plus, Sekiro is just a weird one to make that comparison to. Sekiro is like the extreme level of parry and reading movements and stuff like that. Also, I find it really weird to make a complaint about dodging and parrying in a game. I mean, do you want them to not have dodging and parrying in the game? I feel like that's a vital thing. Also, I mean, you don't want the game to be too bland when it comes to, you're just like, it's like a Dynasty Warrior where there's hundreds of enemies and all you're doing is just mashing the same button over and over. Like, you gotta have some variety in the game. Also, it's adding a nice level of difficulty to the game, right? I mean, you can't just whack your way out of every situation. There's gonna be more of like elite enemies that you may have to do a slight counter to. Like, I mean, these are like basic mechanics in any game that involves like melee combat. Now, to play devil's advocate, there can be the argument that, yes, I'm sure maybe the dodge and parry mechanics aren't as good as they could be, but I think, a lot of us need to get our hands on and actually feel that for ourselves, because overall, I mean, it looks fine to me watching the gameplay.
Maybe 6 hours just wasn't long enough to get the feel for it yet, but I got the sense that it really slowed close combat down with canned animations, breaking up the flow a bit too much. Likewise with the Doom 2016 style finishers, though they are gloriously brutal in their spectacle.
My brother, if you spent 6 hours on this game, I would hope you have a slight grasp of how to dodge and parry things correctly. It's not like they're switching the button on you, you know, of what you have to dodge and parry with. It's the same button. Yes, I'm sure some of the enemies have different attacks that you have to dodge and parry, but like I don't mean to sound like a troll in this situation, but at that point, that's basically just a skill issue. Also, when it comes to the melee mechanics, a lot of times when it comes to games like these, melee is a form of crowd control, keeping your distance from the enemy, kind of resetting a little bit. I mean, you can't play a game where it's just nonstop hordes attacking you 24/7 and you have no chance to breathe or do anything in between. Now, I can see how some people would have a complaint about maybe the repetitiveness of doing this over and over in between fights, etc. Maybe there's not enough variety when it comes to the executions or the visceral attacks, whatever they want to call it. But like I stated earlier, I think in a lot of games like this, it's kind of pivotal to at least have a second to breathe in between fights. I mean, that was the point in Doom 2016 and even Doom Eternal. It gave you a second to breathe and kind of reset, whether it healed you, whether it just, you know, stopped everything for just half a second. Like, these aren't long spans of it's like a 20-second execution. Like, it's half a second out of 5-minute nonstop fight. I think you can be okay with that. Also, you got to display that you're a badass, right? I mean, you know, you do this in like Arkham Asylum, all the Batman series, Bayonetta, Devil May Cry. Like, there's a lot of things where it makes you feel like a badass, right? You're a Space Marine. You're an absolute freaking unit. I mean, I think you would rather do executions than just have it not exist in the game in the first place. Now, for the rest of the video, they kind of go over some decent points of the game. They go over the character classes, the pros and cons for each one, along with some issues that they may have found of playing through the game, like the lack of ammo in certain situations, stuff like that. All this stuff is totally valid. I just want to throw it in there that I don't think everything that they said is a bad take. There's just a lot of really silly ones in there that just don't make a whole lot of sense. They do make a pretty funny point later about how the AI that you're teamed up with can be very bad, which I'm not surprised by that at all. There's maybe like a handful of games I could list that have good AI when it comes to teammates or just in general. You don't really come across that nowadays when it comes to video games, I'll be honest. I mean, going through the Call of Duty storyline or Vermintide playing with just bots as well, they're not good, and I don't think they ever will be for the most part. I don't think they're ever going to hold the ground as much as you'd want them to, but at that point, I feel like a badass because I'm doing double or triple the work, so to my eyes, I feel pretty cool. But that's about it, guys. That just basically covers their video. Like I said, I don't think they make terrible points the whole time, but they got a lot of really funny ones in there that I just think are really silly to complain about. But either way, I'm really excited about this game. Especially just the fact that, you know, there's PvP, there's multiplayer, there's campaign, there's co-op. Like, you get the full package of a game. Not to mention that they've also stated, you know, there's not going to be like a ton of extra DLC things you need to pay for. The only DLC or like in-game purchases is cosmetics, so I love to hear that from a developer. But that's about it. About to get my hands on this game when it comes out. Let me know what you guys think, if you guys are excited about this, or if you have any complaints, what you like, what you hate to see. But anyways, I'll catch you guys in future videos. Thanks for listening to my rant. I will catch you guys in a later one. Bye-bye.